At 6:15 a.m. on July 30, 1943, Staff Sergeant Michael Aruth crawled into the tail section of a B-17 bomber at an airbase in England. Outside, the sky was gray with early morning light. Before the day was over, that light would guide him hundreds of miles into enemy territory. Aruth was only 24 years old. He had already flown 12 combat missions and had 3 confirmed enemy aircraft destroyed. Intelligence reports warned that more than 300 enemy fighters were positioned along the route to the target. He lowered himself onto a small metal seat, no larger than a bicycle saddle. This was his post. The tail gunner's compartment was cramped, just 4 feet wide and 5 feet long. Behind him were 2.50 caliber machine guns aimed through a clear plastic window at the open sky. At 25,000 feet, the outside temperature dropped to minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit. His heated flight suit was the only thing keeping him alive. Without it, exposure would kill him in minutes. The 8th Air Force had a name for this assignment: the loneliest job of the war. The tail gunner worked alone, separated from the rest of the crew by 40 feet of thin metal fuselage. There was no one to talk to, no one to help if something went wrong. Just one man, 2 guns, and whatever enemy aircraft came out of the sky behind him. The numbers told a grim story. In the summer of 1943, a bomber crew survived an average of 11 missions before being shot down, killed, or captured. Tail gunners had one of the highest casualty rates of all. Enemy pilots preferred attacking from the rear, and the tail gunner absorbed the first hits. By July, Aruth's bomb group had already lost 9 aircraft in just 2 months. 90 men were gone. The reason was simple math. Fighters attacking from behind had the longest time to aim and fire. A German fighter closing in from the rear could fire for nearly 10 seconds before passing the bomber. The tail gunner had those same seconds to hit a target rushing toward him at a combined speed of nearly 600 miles per hour. Most never got the chance. One burst from a fighter's cannons could tear through the rear window, kill the gunner, and damage the aircraft's controls. Without tail defense, bombers became easy prey. Training manuals told gunners to wait, save ammunition, fire only when the enemy was within 300 yards. On paper, the logic worked. In real combat, it failed. By the time the enemy reached that distance, they were already firing. Aruth had seen it happen. On an earlier mission, a bomber flying near his own took a direct hit in the tail. The gunner never fired. The fighter came in fast, firing immediately. The aircraft fell out of formation, trailing smoke. 8 parachutes appeared. The tail gunner was not among them. Official doctrine demanded patience. Aruth didn't agree. Enemy pilots knew American gunners waited. They attacked from farther out, firing first, using the training manuals against them. Aruth believed the rules were getting men killed. That morning, 186 bombers took off for bases across eastern England. Fighter escorts would accompany them part of the way, but fuel limits meant those escorts would turn back long before the target. The final stretch would be flown alone. Aruth checked his ammunition, 400 rounds per gun. The manual said it was enough. Aruth believed the manuals were wrong. The formation crossed the English Channel, climbing steadily. Below him, the water faded into distance. Ahead lay occupied Europe and the long flight into danger. Early in his combat career, Aruth followed the rules. He waited, he fired short bursts, he conserved ammunition. But the enemy didn't play by those rules. German pilots fired from long range, damaging bombers before American gunners responded. By the time return fire began, it was often too late. Aruth saw the problem differently. A fighter flying straight toward him presented a large, clear target.
If he fired early, he could adjust his aim as the enemy closed in. Yes, ammunition was limited, but a gunner who saved bullets and died early gained nothing from that discipline. Aruth chose survival. On a mission weeks earlier, 2 enemy fighters approached from behind. Instead of waiting, Aruth opened fire at long range. His shots forced both pilots to break off before they could attack. His bomber returned unharmed. Some crew members questioned his actions, others called it reckless, but his aircraft kept coming home. By mid-July, several other bombers from the squadron had been lost. Now, as the formation crossed into Belgium, the escort fighters peeled away and headed home. The bombers pressed forward alone. Soon, enemy aircraft appeared, dozens of them, climbing into position behind the formation. The first attacker dived from above. Aruth tracked it calmly and opened fire early. His tracers walked up the fuselage. The fighter broke away, trailing smoke, and vanished into the clouds. There was no time to celebrate. Another fighter was already closing in. Aruth fired again, forcing it to pull up and miss its shot. For nearly an hour, the attacks continued. Wave after wave came through the formation. Aruth fired at every threat, using ammunition faster than regulations allowed. His gun barrels glowed from the heat. Then one fighter came straight in, flying level, refusing to turn away. Aruth centered it in his sights and held the triggers down. The machine guns thundered. The fighter tore apart in midair. What remained fell past the bomber, close enough for Aruth to see the empty cockpit. He had survived, again. The enemy pilot was either already gone from the cockpit or dead at the controls. Aruth now had 2 confirmed victories. His ammunition was down to 180 rounds. At 12:51 p.m., the bomber formation reached Kassel and began its bombing run. For the next 11 minutes, the aircraft flew straight and level, unable to evade while the bomb crews lined up their targets. This was the moment the enemy waited for. Enemy fighters attacked again with full force. One Focke-Wulf 19-0 dove in from behind and slightly to the right. Aruth swung his guns and fired a short burst. The round struck the fighter's wing root, but the pilot kept coming. Cannon fire ripped through the bomber's tail. Aruth felt the impacts before the pain hit him. Fragments tore through the rear window, shredded his heated suit, and buried themselves in his left arm and shoulder. His left gun jammed. Hydraulic fluid sprayed across the compartment. Aruth kept firing with his right gun, one-handed, wounded, and losing blood. He followed the damaged fighter as it pulled away and fired one last burst. The rounds tore into its tail. The aircraft snapped into a violent roll and plunged downward. His third kill of the mission. Voices crackled over the intercom. Someone asked about damage. Another crewman warned of incoming flak. Aruth tried to answer, but his mouth was dry and no words came out. Blood pooled on the metal floor and froze almost immediately in the extreme cold. 400 rounds fired, 63 left, 3 enemy fighters destroyed. And the mission was only halfway finished. The bomber still had to fly 250 miles back to England through the same hostile skies. Aruth wrapped a scarf tightly around his injured arm and waited. The return flight began at 1:04 p.m. The formation turned west, leaving Castle burning below, black smoke rising into the sky. Aruth stayed at his post, scanning through blood-smeared plastic. The enemy wasn't done. Fresh fighters regrouped over Belgium, replacing losses from earlier attacks. The second wave would be just as dangerous. Aruth's left arm was numb from cold and injury. The damaged gun was useless. One working weapon, 63 rounds, 250 miles of enemy airspace. That changed everything. He could afford only a few short engagements. Every burst had to matter. At 1:31 p.m.,
2 enemy fighters closed in from the rear left. Aruth waited until they reached 500 yards. Then he fired a precise burst, 12 rounds. The tracers struck the lead fighter's engine. The aircraft rolled over and dove away, leaking coolant. The second pilot broke off immediately. 51 rounds left. By 2:15 p.m., the formation crossed into France. Fighter attacks began to thin as the enemy reached the limits of their range. By 2:47 p.m., the last interceptors fell away. The English Channel came into view soon after. They landed at Kimbleton at 3:52 p.m. Aruth couldn't climb out on his own. Ground crew pulled him through the narrow hatch and carried him to an ambulance. The flight surgeon counted 11 fragment wounds across his arm, shoulder, and upper back. News spread fast. A wounded tail gunner had destroyed 3 enemy fighters and likely damaged 2 more, firing a single gun with limited ammunition. The mission report noted something important. His early firing technique had helped keep the bomber alive. Other gunners took notice. The manual said wait until 300 yards. Aruth fired at 800. The manual said conserve ammunition. Aruth used nearly all of it. The manuals produced casualties. Aruth survived. Combat film confirmed it. His long-range fire disrupted enemy attacks before pilots could settle into firing position. By mid-August, other gunners began using similar methods. Their aircraft returned with less damage. Survival rates improved. Command couldn't ignore the results. A preliminary report reached headquarters on September 1st. Aggressive early fire appeared to reduce bomber losses. The findings challenged years of established training. While this was being studied, Aruth recovered in the station hospital. His injuries missed major nerves and vessels. He was cleared to fly again on August 19th. His old bomber was beyond repair. A replacement waited, same name, same crew. He returned to the tail position on August 26th. The enemy noticed the change. By early September, intelligence reports confirmed that American tail gunners were firing earlier and from longer distances. Rear attacks, once the safest approach, were becoming dangerous. Enemy pilots reacted instinctively when tracers reached out toward them, even when rounds fell short. The enemy adapted. They increased attack speed. They changed angles. They tried targeting aggressive gunners. None of it fully worked. Faster passes reduced accuracy. Steeper dives made aiming harder. Identifying specific gunners in combat was nearly impossible. Between late August and early September, Aruth flew 4 more missions and added 2 confirmed victories. Other gunners added several more. Enemy losses climbed. The air war became a battle of ideas, each side watching, learning, and adjusting. Aruth understood the truth. His advantage wouldn't last forever. Surprise fades. Adaptation follows. The mission scheduled for September 6th would be the test. The target was Stuttgart, deep in enemy territory and heavily defended. The route would take the bombers more than 500 miles into hostile airspace. The 379th was assigned the lead position. Lead meant first contact. Lead meant no room to maneuver. Lead meant absorbing everything the enemy could throw at them. That night, Aruth inspected his guns. Both were newly serviced. He loaded 1,200 rounds instead of the standard 800. Extra weight didn't matter. Fatter power did. The mission launched at 5:40 a.m. on September 6th. 187 bombers climbed into the clouds and turned toward Europe. Enemy fighters found him over France at 9:15 a.m. The first attacks came head-on. Aruth waited, watching the sky behind him fill with contrails. The enemy was gathering strength. By 9:40 a.m., intelligence estimates showed more than 100 enemy fighters tracking the bomber stream. Rear attacks began at 10:08.
A formation of 12 enemy fighters dropped 2,000 feet below the bombers, then pulled up together in a climbing attack from directly behind. Aruth opened fire at roughly 700 yards. His tracers cut into the lead aircraft. 2 fighters broke away immediately. A third took repeated hits and fell out of formation trailing smoke. The remaining 9 pressed in. Cannon fire tore through the bomber formation. Aircraft across the 379th combat box were hit. One bomber off Tandilio's left wing lost power in an engine. Another began leaking fuel from ruptured tanks. Aruth kept firing, shifting aim as fighters flashed past his sights. His ammunition count dropped fast. 600 rounds, then 500, then 400. The attacks did not slow. At 10:31, a Focke-Wulf 190 dived straight down from behind, using the sun to hide its approach. Aruth saw it too late. Heavy shells slammed into the tail before he could fully react. The impacts threw him against the rear window. His left gun was destroyed, shattered by a direct hit. Fragments ripped through his flight suit, opening wounds along his arms and scalp. Blood streamed down his face, blurring his vision. He kept firing with his right gun. The fighter pulled up and rolled away, trailing smoke from hits Aruth had managed to score during the dive. He wiped blood from his eyes and searched for the next threat. The bomber was in serious trouble. Hydraulic lines were severed, tail controls were damaged, fuel tanks had been punctured. The pilots fought to hold altitude, but the aircraft was losing the battle. At 11:04, the formation reached Stuttgart. Tandilio stayed in position just long enough to release its bombs, then dropped out of formation as the damage became unmanageable. 2 engines were running rough. Fuel was critically low. Over eastern France, the crew made the decision. The bomber could not reach England. Their only chance was a controlled ditching in the English Channel, where rescue units might reach them before the cold did. Aruth stayed at his post as the bomber descended, watching the sky for pursuers. None followed. The enemy focused on healthier aircraft still in formation. Tandilio hit the channel at 3:12 p.m., striking the water at high speed. The fuselage broke apart on impact. Aruth was thrown forward, his head striking the gun mount. Darkness followed. When he came to, he was floating in a life raft. British rescue boats were already approaching. All 10 crew members survived. The bomber that had carried them through 17 missions lay on the bottom of the channel. Command immediately requested Aruth's mission reports. On October 14, 1943, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the Army's second highest decoration. The citation highlighted his decision to continue firing while wounded and credited his actions with protecting the aircraft during his most vulnerable moments. By late October, gunnery analysts had completed a broad review of combat data for multiple bomber groups. The findings challenged long-standing assumptions. Tail gunners who engaged at extended ranges survived at higher rates. Early fire disrupted enemy formations and forced attacking pilots to maneuver instead of aiming. The ammunition cost was high, but the trade favored survival. Senior commanders reviewed the results. If multiple bombers fired early, coordinated enemy attacks could be broken apart before they formed. In November, new guidelines quietly authorized tail gunners to fire at longer distances when conditions allowed. The language was cautious, but the shift was real. Aruth never saw the change fully implemented. Had injuries from the ditching proved more serious than first believed. After returning briefly to flight status, medical officers grounded him permanently. Recurring headaches and vision problems made further combat impossible. His final record listed 17 confirmed victories, with several more considered likely.
The total placed him among the most successful bomber gunners of the war. Additional decorations followed, including the Distinguished Flying Cross, Air Medals, and the Purple Heart. He was sent home in early 1944 and assigned to training duty. He spent the rest of the war teaching new gunners the techniques that had kept him alive. After the war, he surprised many by staying in uniform. He transferred to the newly formed U.S. Air Force in 1947 and served another 15 years, retiring in 1962. His post-war life was quiet. He raised a family and rarely spoke about combat. Like many veterans of his generation, he believed those experiences belonged to the past. Others helped preserve the story. Crew members wrote about their missions. Records were archived. Reunions were held. Michael Aruth died in February 1990 at the age of 70. He was laid to rest among other veterans, his headstone marking his service, but not the lives he protected or the doctrine he helped change. Military cemeteries are filled with such stories, names and dates standing in for courage, sacrifice, and quiet impact. The aircraft are gone. The tail gunner position no longer exists, but the lesson remains. Sometimes survival depends on questioning the rules and acting before it is too late.